Welcome to Shadowed Screams, the ultimate destination for spine-chilling horror stories that will haunt your imagination and keep you awake at night. If you love terrifying tales, paranormal encounters, and eerie legends, you found your new home for fear. Before we begin, take a moment and look around the room you're sitting in. The light above you, the quiet hum of electricity in the walls, the silence that settles after midnight. Now imagine spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, in a place where something about a coworker feels wrong. Not strange in a harmless way, but wrong in a way that makes the back of your neck tighten. Tonight's stories come from offices, warehouses, and buildings that still stand. The people involved still work there. Their desks are still occupied. Their key cards still unlock the same doors. If you're listening right now, comment where you're watching from and what time it is where you are, because these stories didn't happen in haunted houses. They happened at work. The building stood alone on the edge of an industrial district where the roads were wide and mostly empty after dark. During the day, it looked ordinary enough. Just another gray office structure with mirrored windows and a parking lot that shimmered under the sun. But at night, the place changed. The fluorescent lights hummed endlessly. The hallways stretched longer than they seemed during daylight hours, and every sound carried. Aaron had been working the night shift for almost 3 months, security monitoring, a quiet job. Just him, a wall of screens, and the occasional patrol through the building's corridors. Most nights passed slowly, almost peacefully. But there was one thing Aaron never quite got used to, a man named Caleb. Caleb worked in records management, a department that technically closed at 6 in the evening. But Caleb never seemed to leave. At first, Aaron assumed he was simply working late. Plenty of people did. Yet, there was something strange about Caleb's routine. Every night, around 1:15 a.m., Aaron would see him on the cameras, walking slowly through the same hallway, always the same direction, always alone, always with the same stiff, careful steps. Aaron checked the logs once. Caleb had swiped into the building that morning at 8:02 a.m., but there was no record of him ever leaving. Not that evening, not that night, not the next morning. Yet somehow, Caleb was always back again the following night, still working, still present, still wandering those same quiet hallways long after the rest of the building slept. At first, Aaron ignored it. Night shifts played tricks on the mind. But then something happened that made the pattern impossible to dismiss. One night, while watching the monitors, Aaron saw Caleb walking down the records hallway again. The same slow pace, the same mechanical rhythm. But halfway down the corridor, Caleb stopped, and for the first time since Aaron had been watching him, he looked directly at the camera. Not casually, not briefly. He stared into the lens as if he knew someone was watching. Then, slowly, he smiled, a thin, patient smile, and continued walking. That was the first moment Aaron felt it. Not fear, exactly, but a quiet, creeping realization. Something about Caleb's presence in that building didn't make sense. And Aaron was about to learn why. Once you notice something strange, it becomes impossible to ignore. Aaron began watching Caleb more carefully, not out of curiosity, out of instinct. The security cameras revealed a pattern that was almost ritualistic. Caleb arrived every morning, worked at his desk, spoke to coworkers, attended meetings, perfectly normal. But when the building emptied and night settled over the industrial district, something changed. Instead of leaving with everyone else, Caleb stayed, and sometime after midnight, he began walking the same hallways, the same slow pace, the same route, every single night. Aaron checked older footage, weeks of it. The pattern stretched back longer than he expected. Caleb had been doing this for months, possibly years, and the strangest part was what Caleb didn't do. He never entered another office, never used the restroom, never sat down. He simply walked, endless quiet loops through the building's deepest corridors. One night, around 2:30 a.m., Aaron decided to do something he had never done before. He left the security room and followed. The building felt different when you were alone inside it. The lights hummed louder, the air felt heavier, and every footstep echoed through the halls like a warning. Aaron moved slowly through the same corridor Caleb always walked. The hallway ahead was empty, but somewhere deeper in the building, he heard footsteps, measured, steady, unhurried. Aaron followed the sound until he reached a corner, and there, just beyond it, was Caleb, walking, exactly as he had on the cameras. Aaron watched from the shadows as Caleb moved farther down the corridor. But then, Caleb stopped, slowly, without turning his head. He spoke, quietly, without emotion. "I know you're there." Aaron froze. The hallway went silent, then Caleb turned. Not surprised, not confused. He simply looked at Aaron the same way he had looked at the camera, with that thin, patient smile, and said something that made Aaron's stomach drop. "You shouldn't stay this late." The next day, Aaron couldn't shake the conversation. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't aggressive, but something about Caleb's calm certainty made it feel wrong. So Aaron started asking questions, quiet ones, casual ones. He asked a coworker how long Caleb had worked there. The answer surprised him. About 2 years. Aaron frowned, because the security archives told a different story. Later that night, when the building was empty again, Aaron searched deeper into the company records. What he found didn't make sense. There had been a Caleb in records management, but he had been hired 5 years earlier, not 2. And the file ended abruptly. A small note from Human Resources. 3 simple words. Missing. Presumed resigned. No explanation, no follow-up, no termination paperwork. Just gone. Aaron checked the employee badge system again. Caleb's badge had never been deactivated. It had been used every single weekday morning since the day he disappeared. Aaron sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. Because there was only one explanation that made any sense. The man walking those halls every night, the man still showing up to work every morning, was someone the company believed had been gone for 3 years. And yet, when Aaron checked the cameras again that night, Caleb was already walking. Weeks passed. Aaron continued working the night shift, and Caleb continued his nightly walks. But Aaron noticed something new. Every route Caleb followed eventually led to the same place. A locked door at the end of a narrow hallway. The door led to an unused storage wing. According to the building schematics, the area had been sealed after a small electrical fire years earlier. No one used it anymore. But every night, Caleb stopped there. He would stand in front of the door for several minutes, not moving, not speaking, just standing, like someone listening. One night, Aaron watched from the hallway as Caleb stood there again. After several minutes, Caleb turned slightly and said quietly, without looking back, "They're quieter now." Aaron's voice felt dry. "Who is?" Caleb paused, then answered in the same calm tone, "The ones who used to follow me." A long silence filled the hallway. Then Caleb added something that chilled Aaron more than anything else. "They stopped when you started watching." Aaron eventually left that job. He transferred departments, then companies. He never saw Caleb again. But before leaving, he checked the employee records one last time. Caleb's badge was still active, still used every morning, still logged inside the building. And every so often, Aaron would remember the way Caleb looked at the cameras. Not surprised, not afraid, just patient. as if he knew something no one else in the building understood. The strangest part? Months later, Aaron met a former coworker from that company. During their conversation, he asked a simple question. Does Caleb still work there? The coworker nodded casually. Yeah, records department. Why? Aaron hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted him for months. Does he ever leave? The coworker laughed. Of course he does. Then, after a moment, he added something strange. Although, come to think of it, I've never actually seen him go home. Every office has a corner that feels quieter than the rest. Not silent, but removed. A place where conversations drift away before they fully form. At the insurance firm on Cedar Street, that corner belonged to Marianne Holt. Her desk sat beside a tall window that faced a narrow alley between buildings. The sunlight rarely reached it. Most days, the glass reflected the interior lights instead of the sky. Marianne had worked there longer than anyone else in the department. No one knew exactly how long. 10 years, maybe longer. She was efficient, quiet, precise in a way that made supervisors trust her immediately. Files passed through her hands quickly, always perfectly organized. But what people remembered most about Marianne was not her work. It was what she knew. Small things at first. She would pass someone in the hallway and casually ask about a doctor's appointment they had never mentioned at work. Or she would quietly remind someone about an important call they had forgotten to make. A call that only existed on their personal phone. The explanations were always reasonable. Someone must have mentioned it. Someone must have overheard. Information travels in offices like wind through open windows. Still, there was something unsettling about the precision of it. Marianne never guessed. She knew. Perfectly. One afternoon, a new employee named Daniel joined the department. Daniel was young, eager, and still adjusting to the rhythm of office life. On his third day, Marianne approached his desk. She placed a neatly labeled folder in front of him. Your client file, she said gently. Daniel thanked her, but as she turned to leave, Marianne paused. Then she said something that made the room feel suddenly smaller. You should call your sister tonight. Daniel looked up, confused. I don't have a sister, he said. Marianne tilted her head slightly, as if considering the statement. Then she gave a faint, thoughtful smile. Yes, she said quietly. You do. And walked away. 2 hours later, Daniel's phone rang. It was a hospital in another state. The nurse explained that they had found his name listed as an emergency contact for a patient. A woman, his half-sister. Someone he had only discovered existed a week earlier. Someone he had never spoken about at work. When Daniel returned to the office the next morning, he looked at Marianne differently, because the question had already begun forming in his mind. How did she know? Over time, Daniel began noticing something unsettling about Marianne's presence in the office. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't linger in conversations or insert herself into gossip. If anything, Marianne seemed almost invisible. People spoke freely around her. They assumed she wasn't paying attention. But Daniel started to notice the pattern. Marianne always listened. Her eyes rarely left the paperwork in front of her, but her attention seemed to stretch outward like invisible threads. And every so often, she would reveal something she shouldn't possibly know. One afternoon, a manager named Paul stormed out of a meeting room. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tightly. No one knew what had happened. The meeting had been private. Paul returned to his desk and sat down heavily. A moment later, Marianne stood from her corner desk and walked quietly across the office. She placed a cup of coffee beside him. You shouldn't worry too much, she said softly. Paul looked at her in confusion. The board isn't angry about the numbers. Paul's expression froze. They're angry about the email. The entire office went silent. Paul stood slowly. How could you possibly know that? He asked. Marianne simply adjusted the sleeve of her cardigan. They'll calm down in a few days, she said. Then she returned to her desk. The email Paul had sent, an angry late-night message criticizing a board member, had been sent from his personal laptop. At home. No one in the office knew about it yet. No one except Marianne. After that day, Daniel began paying closer attention. He noticed that Marianne never asked questions. She answered them, sometimes before people even realized they needed answers. A week later, Daniel stayed late to finish a project. The office emptied slowly. Lights dimmed. Printers fell silent. Eventually, only 2 desks remained occupied. Daniel's and Marianne's. The quiet stretched between them. Then Marianne spoke without looking up. You should be careful about trusting Thomas. Daniel felt a small chill run down his spine. Thomas was his supervisor. Why? Daniel asked cautiously. Marianne turned a page in her file. Because he's already preparing a report about you. Daniel stared at her. What kind of report? Marianne paused. Then she answered in the same calm tone she always used. The kind that gets someone replaced. Daniel's stomach tightened, because Thomas had been nothing but friendly since the day he arrived. But 2 weeks later, Daniel was called into a meeting. A report had been filed questioning his performance, and the author of that report was Thomas. From that day forward, Daniel stopped dismissing Marianne's strange knowledge as coincidence. Something about her awareness went deeper than overheard conversations, deeper than workplace gossip. It was as if she stood in the center of a web of quiet truths and felt every vibration before anyone else noticed the thread had moved. And slowly, Daniel began to wonder something else. What did Marianne know about him that she hadn't said yet? 3 months after Daniel started working there, the office experienced a small crisis. A major client claimed several important documents had been altered. Management ordered an immediate review of the records department, which meant every file, every entry, every transaction had to be examined. The task fell largely to Marianne. She worked calmly through stacks of folders late into the evening, while the rest of the department grew tense and exhausted. At one point, Daniel offered to help. Marianne accepted with a quiet nod. Together they worked through the files in the silent office. The hours stretched into night. At some point, Daniel opened a cabinet drawer he had never used before. Inside were several old folders, much older than the others. The paper was slightly yellowed, the labels written in careful handwriting, and one of the names on those labels stopped him cold. It was his, Daniel Reyes. He pulled the folder out slowly. Inside were documents, not work records, personal records, addresses he had lived at, old school transcripts, even a copy of a childhood photograph. Daniel turned toward Marianne slowly. His voice felt distant. Why is there a file about me? Marianne looked up from her desk, for the first time since Daniel had known her. Her expression changed, not fear, not guilt, just a quiet recognition. As I said before, she replied gently, you should be careful about what people keep records of. Daniel held the folder tightly. Who made this? Marianne studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that made the entire room feel colder. I didn't make it. Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. Then who did? Marianne closed the folder she had been reviewing, and for the first time, her eyes met his directly. The person who sat at that desk before me. Daniel glanced toward the corner desk. The dim lamp, the narrow window, the place Marianne had worked for years. How long ago was that? He asked. Marianne's voice lowered slightly. Long enough that most people here don't remember her. Daniel felt a slow weight settle in his chest. Where did she go? Marianne looked back down at her paperwork and answered with quiet certainty. She still works here. The lights above them flickered once, softly, and in the reflection of the window beside Marianne's desk, Daniel could have sworn he saw a second figure standing behind her chair, perfectly still, watching. The building stood in the center of a quiet business district, surrounded by glass towers that reflected the sky like cold mirrors. During the day, the offices buzzed with the usual rhythm of corporate life, phones ringing, keyboards tapping, muted conversations drifting across cubicles. But the accounting department lived in a different kind of silence. It occupied the 12th floor, a long stretch of cubicles beneath rows of fluorescent lights that hummed faintly, day and night. The department had recently hired a new accountant named Lena Ortiz. It was her first week. Like most new employees, Lena spent the first few days learning the systems, memorizing passwords, and trying to recognize faces she would see every day. There was one coworker she noticed immediately, a man who sat 3 desks away from her. He worked quietly, rarely spoke, and arrived earlier than anyone else. His desk was always perfectly organized, no decorations, no photographs, just a laptop, a notebook, and a single black pen. His name, according to the small plastic nameplate, was Michael Grant. The strange thing was, no one had introduced him. On Lena's second day, she greeted him politely. "Morning." Michael looked up slowly. He gave a brief nod, but said nothing. His eyes lingered for a moment longer than felt comfortable. Then he returned to his work. At first, Lena assumed he was simply quiet. Every office had someone like that. But as the days passed, she began noticing something else. Michael never joined conversations, never went to lunch, never attended meetings. Yet every morning, he was there, already working, already typing, already present before the rest of the office arrived. And every evening, when the lights dimmed and employees began gathering their things, Michael stayed. Always. As if the concept of leaving simply did not apply to him. 1 week later, the department manager called a staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the conference room, everyone except Michael. His chair remained empty. No one seemed concerned. The meeting lasted nearly an hour. When it ended, the employees returned to their desks. Michael was sitting exactly where he had been before, typing quietly. Lena approached her coworker Marcus, who sat beside her. She spoke quietly. "Why didn't Michael come to the meeting?" Marcus looked confused. "Who?" Lena nodded toward the desk. "The guy over there." Marcus followed her gaze, but instead of recognition, his brow tightened slightly. "There's nobody there." Lena blinked. "What do you mean? He's right." She stopped. Because the desk was empty. The laptop was gone. The chair pushed neatly under the desk. No nameplate, no notebook, nothing. Just an empty workspace. Marcus shrugged. "That desk's been unused for months." Lena stared at it silently, because she could have sworn, just seconds earlier, Michael had been sitting there, typing, watching. That evening, when the office emptied and the lights dimmed, Lena stayed late to finish a report. The floor was quiet, printers silent, air vents whispering softly in the ceiling. And when she looked up from her screen, Michael was back at the desk, typing. Exactly as before. The following morning, Lena decided to do something simple. She searched the company employee directory. Every employee in the building was listed there. Photos, departments, email addresses. But there was no Michael Grant, not in accounting, not in any department. At first, she assumed the system was outdated, so she walked to human resources. The HR assistant listened politely while Lena explained. "A coworker named Michael Grant," Lena said. "He sits near my desk." The assistant typed the name into the payroll system, then paused. "There's no one here by that name." Lena felt a quiet unease settle in her chest. Maybe he's a contractor. The assistant searched again. Nothing. "Are you sure you have the right company?" she asked with a small smile. Lena forced a polite laugh. "Yes." When she returned to the 12th floor, Michael was sitting at his desk again. This time he wasn't typing. He was simply watching her, calmly, patiently, as if he already knew where she had been. Lena hesitated before sitting down. The office noise slowly filled the space around them. Phones, conversations, the normal sound of work. But Michael never joined it. He simply turned his attention back to the laptop. Later that afternoon, Lena quietly asked Marcus again, "Do you really not see him?" Marcus looked puzzled. "See who?" Lena turned toward Michael's desk. He was still there, still working, still present. But Marcus's eyes slid past the chair as if it were empty space. That night, Lena stayed late again. The office lights had dimmed automatically, leaving only a few rows illuminated. The silence felt heavier than usual. Michael was still at his desk. But tonight, something was different. He wasn't typing. He was looking through a stack of old papers. Curiosity overcame Lena. She stood and slowly walked toward him. When she reached the desk, she noticed the documents. They were old, very old, printed on yellowed paper, company records from years ago. One photograph rested on top of the stack. A team picture, accounting department. Lena leaned closer. Her breath caught, because the man standing in the back row of the photo was Michael. The photo was dated 1998, nearly 30 years earlier. Lena felt the room tilt slightly. "That's not possible," she whispered. Michael slowly lifted his eyes. For the first time, he spoke. His voice was calm, low, almost distant. "They forgot to remove me." Lena stared at him. "What do you mean?" Michael studied the photograph. "The payroll system was updated," he said quietly. "Records were deleted." His fingers rested gently on the old paper. "But some things remain." Lena's voice shook. "How long have you been here?" Michael thought for a moment, then answered simply, "Longer than anyone remembers." The overhead lights flickered softly, and for just a moment, the reflection in Michael's computer screen did not match the man sitting in the chair. It showed someone older, much older, watching her. 3 weeks later, Lena resigned. Officially, she told the company she had received another offer. Unofficially, she simply could not continue working on the 12th floor. Before leaving, she asked Marcus one last question. "That empty desk near mine, why hasn't anyone taken it?" Marcus shrugged. "They tried. When the last renovation happened, management wanted to remove it." "What happened?" Marcus hesitated, then gave a quiet laugh. "The maintenance team said something strange." Lena felt the air grow colder around her. "What?" Marcus lowered his voice. "They said the desk was bolted into the floor from underneath. But when they checked the floor plans, there was no support beam there. No anchor. No reason it should be fixed in place." Lena left the building that afternoon and never returned. But months later, she met a former coworker for coffee. During their conversation, she asked casually about the office. "Did anyone ever take that empty desk?" Her friend shook his head. "No." Then he added something strange. "Actually, there's someone sitting there now." Lena's hands slowly tightened around her cup. "Someone new?" Her friend thought for a moment. "I guess so. He's very quiet, always working. Gets there before everyone else. And strangely," her friend frowned slightly, "I don't think I've ever seen him leave." The 12th floor lights still hum softly every night, and if someone stays late enough, they might notice a man sitting at a desk that does not officially exist, working patiently, silently, waiting for the company records to remember him again. But until that happens, he will simply continue doing what he has always done, working, watching, and remaining exactly where he has always been, inside a job that never put him on the payroll. Subscribe to Shadowed Screams now and join our growing community of horror enthusiasts. Hit the notification bell to never miss a chilling upload, because the shadows are watching and the screams are only beginning.